but the Comey FBI failed to review the evidence at the time. After nearly a decade in the shadows, this information has now come to light thanks to Dr. Patel, or Director Patel. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, during your confirmation hearing, you made several important commitments. For instance, you told Senator Coons there will be no politicization at the FBI. There'll be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as FBI director. So let me ask you very specifically, did you ever take any action to terminate or discipline an FBI agent or employee in whole or in part as retribution for being part of an investigation of Donald Trump or January 6th?
No.
Move her to a prison not suitable for a sex offender. You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates.
Not in the weeds?
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you. And we have countlessly proven you to be a liar in Russiagate, in January 6th. You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised that you continue to lie from your perch and put on a show so you can go raise money for your charade. You are a political buffoon at best. 1,000 pages of information to you. I challenge you to say anything credibly to the truth. Go ahead and run to the cameras where you want to go now.
When most people think of a Senate hearing, they imagine a quiet room with mahogany tables, stiff suits, and senators droning on about policy in a tone so flat it could double as a sleep aid. But not this time. This time, the Senate Judiciary Committee turned into a political theater stage, and the audience got front row seats to a drama that would make daytime soap operas jealous. The reason for the fireworks? A hearing that was supposed to be about oversight, but quickly became about survival, credibility, and who could yell louder without losing their voice. The official setting was Kash Patel's first major oversight hearing since being confirmed as director of the FBI earlier this year. Now let's pause here, because that detail is important. Patel isn't some random bureaucrat warming a leather chair. He's a Trump ally, a former national security aide, and now the man holding the keys to one of the most powerful institutions in the country. That's like handing the car keys to a guy who used to argue with the driving instructor. The ride is bound to be bumpy. The agenda for the hearing was stacked with the kinds of topics that attract cameras like moths to a flame. First up, the FBI's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files, including the infamous Black Book, and why Ghislaine Maxwell was suddenly transferred to a lower security prison under circumstances that raised more eyebrows than a Botox convention. If you thought the Epstein saga was over, think again. It just walked back into Congress with all the subtlety of a marching band. Second on the list, Patel's leadership style, specifically accusations that he's turned the FBI into a politically charged machine. Critics say he's been busy purging agents who worked on sensitive cases like Trump's investigations or January 6th, replacing impartial law enforcement with loyal foot soldiers. Supporters, of course, say he's doing what no one else had the courage to do, drain the swamp within the FBI itself. Depending on where you stand, Patel is either a reformer or a wrecking ball. Add to that the ongoing national debate over whether federal law enforcement agencies are protecting democracy or weaponizing politics, and you can see why this hearing was destined for drama. It wasn't just about Patel answering a few tough questions. It was about two competing visions of America clashing under the fluorescent lights of Capitol Hill. And then there's the political star power. On one side, you've got Adam Schiff, a seasoned Democrat, former lead impeachment manager, and someone who has made a career out of hammering Trump and his allies. On the other, you've got Kash Patel, a man who practically wrote a book about fighting what he calls the deep state. Put those two in the same room, and you don't need a scriptwriter. The tension writes itself. What makes the setup even juicier is that this wasn't some private backroom grilling. This was public, televised, all eyes on you event. That means every question, every dodge, every raised voice wasn't just directed at each other. It was aimed squarely at the American public. Schiff knew every line could end up as a viral clip on cable news or Twitter. Patel knew every answer could either shore up his image as a reformer or brand him forever as a partisan hitman. Both men understood they weren't just sparring in a Senate chamber, they were performing on a national stage. So, let's summarize. The setting was primed with controversy, the players were battle-tested, and the stakes were monumental. If this hearing were a boxing match, the opening bell had just rung, and both fighters were already eyeing each other like they'd been waiting years for this rematch. The only thing missing was someone selling popcorn in the back row. If Fact 1 set the stage, Fact 2 is where the curtain ripped, the lights overheated, and the actors forgot they were supposed to be respectable public servants. What unfolded wasn't just a heated exchange, it was a verbal cage fight dressed up as a Senate hearing. Think less measured oversight and more Thanksgiving dinner argument where nobody likes the turkey. The drama kicked off when Senator Adam Schiff, armed with folders, notes, and his trademark squint of righteous disapproval, pressed Kash Patel on the issue of political retribution inside the FBI. Schiff asked Patel directly if he had ever terminated, disciplined, or punished FBI agents who worked on cases connected to Donald Trump or January 6th. It was supposed to be a simple yes or no question, the kind of straightforward inquiry where you either say yes or no and move on. Instead, Patel treated the question like it was a live grenade, and he was trying to juggle it. Schiff asked, "Did you ever terminate or discipline an FBI agent in whole or in part because of their work on Trump or January 6th?" Patel's answer? Employees are only terminated for failing to uphold their constitutional oaths, which sounds like a solid answer until Schiff pointed out that Patel was carefully dodging the actual question. The back and forth quickly turned into a duel of semantics, with Schiff trying to pin Patel into giving a yes or no, and Patel refusing to play along. If you've ever watched two lawyers argue about whether technically it counts as an admission, you've seen the movie before. But then the gloves came off. Schiff accused Patel of setting a trap with his language, and Patel fired back that Schiff was trying to twist his words for the cameras. And just like that, the hearing flipped from tense to explosive. At one point, Patel's frustration boiled over. Looking straight at Schiff, he declared, "You are the biggest fraud to ever sit in the United States Senate. You are a disgrace to this institution and an utter coward. You are a political buffoon at best." Imagine hearing that inside a Senate chamber, a place where senators usually settle for passive-aggressive phrases like, "my distinguished colleague." Patel basically went full stand-up roast mode on a sitting senator, and the room went silent for a beat as everyone realized, oh, this is going viral. Schiff, for his part, didn't stay quiet. He snapped back with a line designed to sting and stick in headlines. "You can make an internet troll the FBI director, but you will always be an internet troll." That's right. Schiff downgraded Patel from FBI director to professional keyboard warrior. Brutal. Especially considering Patel's critics often accuse him of being more interested in political loyalty than law enforcement integrity. The insult wasn't just name-calling, it was branding Patel as someone fundamentally unfit for the role. The exchange had the rhythm of a boxing match. Patel would launch into a long, fiery defense of his record, accusing Schiff of lying about Russia, lying about January 6th, lying basically about everything. Schiff would interrupt, demand a yes or no, and then slam Patel for evading. Patel would counterpunch with accusations of political theater. At one point, Patel even said Schiff only cared about raising money off the spectacle, accusing him of staging a performance to impress donors. For viewers at home, it was less C-SPAN monotony and more primetime TV showdown. Social media lit up with clips of the screaming, memes labeling the fight as Capitol Hill Smackdown, and commentators marveling at how far the standards of civility have collapsed. Senate hearings have always had their sharp moments, but this was shouting, name-calling, and open hostility. It wasn't just the clash of ideas, it was a clash of egos. Even other senators on the committee were visibly uncomfortable. At one point, the chairman had to bang the gavel and remind both men to calm down, like a teacher breaking up a hallway brawl. The message was clear. This wasn't oversight anymore. This was a score-settling arena where both sides wanted sound bites to fuel their political bases. And here's the kicker. While the shouting match was dramatic, it also overshadowed the substance of the questions. Schiff's main point, whether Patel was purging FBI staff for political reasons, got drowned out by the verbal fireworks. Patel's main defense, that he was only holding agents accountable to the Constitution, barely made it through the noise. What people will remember isn't the policy dispute, but the insults, the tone, and the sheer theatricality of it all. If Fact 1 was about the buildup, Fact 2 was the explosion, the moment when the Senate hearing transformed into a viral spectacle. It was ugly, it was loud, and it was, for better or worse, unforgettable. And if you thought two grown men shouting across the Senate floor was wild, buckle up because other senators decided to jump in too, dragging Epstein, Maxwell, and even so-called enemies lists into the chaos. That's Fact 3, and it's where the plot takes an even darker twist. If the Patel-Schiff showdown was the main event, what came next was the undercard that somehow stole parts of the show. Because just when you thought the Senate hearing couldn't get any wilder, in stepped other senators, armed with their own grievances, scandals, and pointed questions. And the result? A political free-for-all that touched on everything from Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book to allegations that Patel was running the FBI like a personal revenge squad. Let's start with Senator Cory Booker. Now, Booker has never been shy about speaking his mind, but on this day, he came loaded for battle. Looking Patel square in the eye, Booker accused him of turning the FBI into a political enforcer and making the country less safe. That's the kind of line you usually hear in a campaign ad, not in a Senate hearing. But it stuck, because Booker's point was straightforward. Under Patel's leadership, the FBI wasn't just enforcing the law, it was enforcing loyalty. He painted a picture of an institution bending not toward justice, but toward the political whims of those in power. Patel's response? Classic defiance. He dismissed Booker's accusations as baseless, accusing Democrats of weaponizing oversight to smear him. And here's where the theater comes in. Instead of carefully worded rebuttals, Patel went full rhetorical haymaker again. He accused his critics of caring more about political optics than national security, reminding everyone that the FBI under his watch had, in his words, delivered historic transparency. He even claimed that Democrats, including Schiff, were only interested in keeping their fundraising machines humming by attacking him in public. In Patel's world, the real danger wasn't his leadership style. It was senators trying to turn oversight into a circus. Then the hearing swerved into the Epstein files because why not toss gasoline on a fire that was already raging? Schiff and others pressed Patel on why Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted trafficker and Epstein's infamous accomplice, had been transferred from a high-security prison to a lower-security one after meeting with DOJ officials. If you think that sounds suspicious, you're not alone. Critics suggested this looked less like a bureaucratic shuffle and more like political meddling. Patel, however, insisted he wasn't involved and doubled down on his "I'm the most transparent FBI director in history" claim. Transparency, however, doesn't explain why someone like Maxwell, whose crimes are well documented, ended up in a facility better suited for non-violent offenders. That question hung in the air like smoke no one wanted to clear. But the real grenade rolled in when the discussion turned to what's been dubbed Patel's enemies list. This isn't some conspiracy theory whispered in the corners of Reddit forums. It's rooted in Patel's own book, Government Gangsters, where he named individuals he claimed were part of the deep state undermining the country. Democrats allege that those names weren't just words in a book. They've become actual targets within the FBI under Patel's watch. Fired, reassigned, marginalized. The accusations say people on Patel's hit list are paying real-world prices for being in his crosshairs. Patel, of course, denied it all, calling the claims political theater designed to delegitimize his reforms. But you could feel the tension in the room tighten when senators pressed him on whether he had essentially institutionalized revenge politics inside the FBI. Think about what that means for a second. If true, the head of the FBI would be running the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency like a high school clique, rewarding friends, punishing enemies, and keeping score in a way that undermines the very foundation of impartial justice. And even if it's not true, the perception alone is poisonous, because when half the country believes the FBI is playing political favorites, the Bureau's credibility takes a hit no matter what the facts are. By this point, the hearing had officially drifted far away from dry oversight and deep into spectacle territory. Senators weren't just asking questions anymore. They were auditioning for viral clips, rehearsing lines that would live forever on cable news highlight reels. Patel wasn't just defending himself, he was battling for legitimacy. His voice raised, his words sharpened like knives. And viewers at home? They were left wondering whether the nation's most important institutions were being safeguarded or slowly turned into battlegrounds for partisan warfare. So yes, Schiff and Patel had the loudest clash, but Booker's jabs, the Epstein curveballs, and the whispers of enemies list added layers to the chaos. What should have been a straightforward oversight hearing had now become something else entirely. A referendum not just on Patel, but on whether Americans could still trust the FBI to play fair. And here's the thing. All of that shouting, finger-pointing, and scandal-dropping wasn't just for drama's sake. It has consequences. Because when the dust settled, the fallout wasn't just about who yelled loudest, it was about whether Patel's FBI could survive the political firestorm. That's fact 4. If the earlier moments of the hearing were fireworks, the fallout was the smoke that lingered in the room long after the explosions had faded. And this is where things got complicated. Because once you strip away the yelling, the name-calling, and the viral sound bites, you're left with a very real and very serious question. What does all of this do to the FBI's legitimacy? And how do lawmakers, the public, and even Patel himself recover from a spectacle that played out like political theater on steroids? Let's start with the immediate reactions inside the chamber. Democrats wasted no time framing Patel as a dangerous figure, accusing him of politicizing an agency that's supposed to stand above politics. To them, Patel wasn't simply dodging questions. He was deliberately eroding trust by refusing to give clear answers. They hammered him for avoiding yes or no responses, for spinning questions into speeches, and for turning the hearing into what looked more like a campaign rally than a congressional check-in. Schiff led the charge, of course, but others chimed in, making it clear that this wasn't just a one-senator beef. The Democratic narrative was simple. Patel isn't protecting the FBI, he's weaponizing it. Republicans, meanwhile, played an entirely different tune. To them, Patel was standing tall against a hostile Senate eager to distort his record. Supporters framed him as a reformer willing to say the things past FBI directors never dared to say. In their view, Patel wasn't attacking Schiff out of weakness, but out of strength, showing that he refuses to be cowed by political bullying. When Patel accused Schiff of being a fraud and a coward, some on the right quietly cheered. For them, this wasn't a breach of decorum, it was a refreshing display of backbone. And then there was the press. Headlines didn't pull punches. Capitol Hill meltdown, Patel and Schiff explode, and FBI director calls a senator a fraud, lit up news sites within minutes. Clips flooded social media, chopped down to the most explosive 5 seconds of the exchange. Patel calling Schiff a fraud, Schiff calling Patel an internet troll. Context? Gone. Nuance? Lost. But virality? Achieved. The sound bites became the story, leaving the underlying policy debates buried under a pile of memes, GIFs, and outraged think pieces. But beneath the media circus, a deeper problem was brewing. Public trust in the FBI has already been shaky for years, bouncing between accusations of political bias from the left and the right. One day, conservatives claim the Bureau is unfairly targeting Trump. The next, liberals accuse it of shielding Trump and going soft on January 6th. By the time Patel and Schiff finished screaming at each other, both narratives had fresh fuel. Conservatives could say, see, Patel's just cleaning house, while liberals could say, see, Patel's just writing a revenge squad. And for the average American watching at home, the only clear takeaway was this. The FBI looks messy, partisan, and anything but impartial. Even neutral observers raised alarms. Political scientists and legal experts warned that hearings like this don't just damage individual reputations, they damage institutions. When the head of the FBI is seen trading insults with senators like a schoolyard brawl, the perception of professionalism goes out the window. Instead of projecting authority and impartiality, Patel looked combative and defensive. Instead of demonstrating oversight, Schiff looked opportunistic and performative. Together, they didn't just clash, they dragged the FBI and the Senate down into the mud with them. And then came the ripple effect. Calls for further investigations, subpoenas, and more hearings. Democrats hinted that Patel's alleged retaliations against FBI employees might warrant a deeper probe, possibly even into whether he abused his power as director. Republicans countered that Democrats were on a witch hunt, more interested in headlines than accountability. That meant Patel's problems weren't ending in the hearing room, they were only beginning. And let's not forget the international angle either. America's institutions don't operate in a vacuum. The world is watching. For allies, seeing the FBI director and a prominent senator screaming at each other on live television is a reminder that U.S. politics are deeply fractured. For adversaries, it's propaganda gold. Russian, Chinese, and Iranian state media had a field day replaying the insults, framing it as proof that America is in decline and its institutions are crumbling under the weight of their own dysfunction. The fight wasn't just a domestic embarrassment, it was an international spectacle. So, what's left after the dust settles? On one side, a director clinging to his claim of transparency, insisting he's reforming an agency that desperately needs it. On the other, senators convinced he's turning the Bureau into a partisan weapon. In the middle, the American people, left to wonder if they can trust the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency to play it straight. The fallout wasn't just about Patel's reputation or Schiff's ego. It was about the credibility of the FBI itself. And credibility, once lost, is nearly impossible to regain. Now here's the million-dollar question. What does this all mean for the future? Because this wasn't just a hearing gone wild, it was a preview of where American politics might be heading. And that's fact 5. By the time the gavel came down and the senators shuffled out of the room, one thing was clear. This hearing wasn't just about Kash Patel, Adam Schiff, or even the FBI. It was about something bigger. The direction of American politics, the fragility of its institutions, and the uncomfortable reality that shouting matches may now be the new normal in government oversight. In short, it was less about what happened that day and more about what it means for the days to come. Let's start with the erosion of norms. Senate hearings have always had tension. You've seen witnesses spar with senators, you've heard sharp lines, and occasionally tempers flare. But what happened here wasn't a brief outburst. It was a sustained shouting match, complete with personal insults, sarcasm, and verbal body slams. When Patel called Schiff a fraud and a political buffoon, he broke through the invisible guardrails of decorum that used to keep hearings from turning into public brawls. Schiff's comeback, branding Patel an internet troll, only cemented the breakdown. Once you normalize this kind of exchange, it's hard to go back. The Senate floor is beginning to resemble social media comment sections, only with higher ceilings and better microphones. And here's why that matters. The erosion of norms doesn't just stay contained within Capitol Hill. It seeps outward, shaping how the public views politics and governance. When citizens see lawmakers and officials screaming at each other like bitter rivals at a high school football game, it reinforces the idea that politics is nothing more than performance art. That's dangerous because it erodes trust not just in the individuals involved, but in the very institutions they represent. If the Senate is reduced to theater and the FBI to a political weapon, what's left for the average American to believe in? Then there's the issue of legitimacy. The FBI's power rests not only on its ability to investigate and enforce the law, but also on the public's perception that it does so fairly. If half the country thinks the FBI director is a partisan enforcer and the other half sees him as a hero reformer, then the institution itself is compromised. No matter how many cases the Bureau wins or how many reforms Patel insists he's implemented, its work will always be filtered through the lens of suspicion. And suspicion, once entrenched, doesn't just vanish, it festers, fueling conspiracy theories, deepening polarization, and making it nearly impossible to build consensus on even the most basic matters of justice. What's even more telling is how this moment fits into the broader arc of political polarization. Patel and Schiff didn't just disagree, they turned their disagreement into a show, one that played directly to their respective bases. Schiff's sharp one-liners and Patel's fiery denunciations weren't crafted for each other. They were crafted for the cameras, for the clips, for the viral posts that would flood X, Facebook, and TikTok within hours. This is politics as performance, oversight as entertainment. And while it may win points in the short term, fundraising dollars, cable news appearances, a bump in online engagement, the long-term cost is institutional credibility. But here's the twist. Moments like these also set precedents. The next time an FBI director is hauled before Congress, the expectation won't be civility, it will be confrontation. The next senator who feels like grandstanding won't hesitate to trade insults if it means trending on social media. What was once shocking becomes routine, and once it's routine, the institution itself adapts around it. That's how norms erode, not with a bang, but with repeated applause for bad behavior. So what does this mean going forward? It means oversight hearings may become less about accountability and more about generating viral clips. It means Americans may grow even more cynical about whether agencies like the FBI are independent or political. It means adversaries abroad will continue to exploit the imagery of dysfunction, framing America not as a global leader, but as a fractured republic too busy yelling at itself to lead anyone else. And domestically, it means voters are stuck choosing which spectacle they dislike less, rather than which leader they trust more. In the end, this wasn't just a hearing. It was a stress test of American democracy, and the results weren't encouraging. Patel may survive the scandal, Schiff may cash in on the outrage, and both men may return to their corners with more headlines under their belts. But the institutions they represent, they walk away weaker, more polarized, and less trusted. And that's the real story here. Not who shouted the loudest, but how the shouting chipped away at the foundation of public trust. So, now we've seen it all. The setup, the explosion, the side battles, the fallout, and the bigger picture. But before we wrap, let's zoom out one last time. Because this wasn't just a Senate fight. It was a signpost for where America's politics might be headed next.
So, what did we just witness? A Senate hearing that turned into a full-blown political street fight. Kash Patel, the FBI director who promised reform and transparency, came out swinging, accusing Adam Schiff of being a fraud, a coward, and a political buffoon. Schiff, never one to miss his cue, fired back by calling Patel an internet troll in a suit. Add in Senator Cory Booker, the Epstein files, whispers of an enemies list, and you've got yourself a hearing that looked less like oversight and more like a live-streamed cage match. But here's the takeaway. While the insults made the headlines, the real story is about trust. Trust in the FBI, trust in Congress, trust in whether America's most powerful institutions are functioning or just fueling the next viral clip. When hearings sound more like shouting matches than fact-finding mishes, the cost isn't just bad optics. It's a slow bleed of legitimacy. And once legitimacy goes, it doesn't come back easily. Now, here's where you come in. If you think this spectacle says something deeper about the state of American politics, drop your take in the comments. Who came out on top? Patel with his fiery punches, or Schiff with his cold, cutting comebacks? And while you're at it, hit that like button so more people see the breakdown. Subscribe to @GlobalPulseNews for sharp, bold, no-nonsense political analysis. And ring the bell so you don't miss the next round of chaos on Capitol Hill. Because trust me, this isn't the last fight, just the latest.